I find this whole kangaroo issue in Australia, and I think I'm a pretty tough guy. I find the whole issue extremely distressing, and I think what the Victorian government have done in relation to the commercial industry is introduce this mass slaughter of wildlife up close and personal to people living in regional Victoria. So not only do I worry about the actual kangaroos themselves, but the stories we're hearing from, property owners around Victoria are immensely distressing. And how a government can be so utterly cruel to its own people and so thoughtless, I just find it quite remarkable.
So the impact of brutality, violence to wildlife has a huge impact on not only the carers but also the general population in their own environment, in their homes, because the shooters have no respect for boundaries or for other people's well-being. It's such an intrusive activity, and they don't really care at all about its impact on not only the animals but on other humans.
The whole notion that animals were harvested on the basis of damage mitigation. So the argument has always been that, well, if we have to kill the animals because they're in such large numbers and they're wrecking our fences and eating the grass, then while you've got the bodies on the ground, you might as well utilise them. And while that sounds like a very sound argument, the reality is the industry was never able to have been formatted to survive based on damage mitigation, because the reasons for that are just not great enough. And in fact, the new harvesting industry that has been initiated by the government is not based on damage. So this is all about making money. It's about looking for a resource that's out there that nobody's had to work to develop, and to basically it's a free-for-all, so that there's a quick dollar to be made while they unsustainably harvest wild animals until they're at a point where they can't fill the abattoirs any longer, which is what's happened everywhere else in Australia. So it's hard to believe that we've allowed this to happen in Victoria as well.
The first thing you know when the commercial kangaroo harvester pulls up beside your house is the sound of the rifle. A high-powered, high-caliber rifle cracks through the atmosphere like you wouldn't believe. And regardless of what you're doing, whether you're watching TV or doing your chores or lying in bed, that goes through you like a knife. Kangaroos that we know and love, we know them personally. They've been body shot or neck shot, and the kangaroo harvester goes up and pulls them by the ear, pulls their head up, cuts their throat, or beats them with an axe, or beats them with a metal bar. And I've stood beside kangaroos. We've been 20, 30 metres away from that happening, and just stand there, loving that poor kangaroo as much as we possibly can, and loving each other.
Some of the injuries are really quite gruesome, particularly those that have been shot, because they're not, it's the idea that you shoot a kangaroo and it's a clean shot to the head and it leads to instant death is a complete and utter myth. That does not happen at all. Either because the people are inexperienced, either because of the climate conditions and the weather conditions of the day, or the animal moves, or whatever it might be. The idea that it's a clean shot to the head, which the kangaroo harvesting industry would like to tell you, it's a complete and utter myth. And we see the consequences here of the kinds of injuries that are caused by animals being shot by guns, by 22s, by shotguns, by bow and arrow. We see them all here. They've had their faces blown off and they're still alive. They've got arrows through their arms, they're still alive. All manner of injuries. Injuries to the tail, the body, the shoulder, the face. And all these animals are still alive. And we have them here. Some we can treat, some we can't. They have to be euthanized. Their injuries are so horrific, they have to be euthanized. But these animals are left alive. So the idea that there's any way humane killing going on here is rubbish. It doesn't happen at all.
And you'll hear the knife being sharpened. You can hear the loppers chopping off the legs and the arms and the tail. You can hear the knife come out. And during the evisceration process, when all of the insides of the animals are tipped outside, you hear the plop on the ground. And you can finally hear the head get cut off and hit the ground with a thud. So that's the proximity of the industry to where we would sit and have a cup of tea.
We run a yoga retreat in the southern Grampians, or Garryword, next to Garryword Grampians National Park. People travel here from around the world to do yoga.
We had this vision of having a retreat centre and also getting away from the city and really finding a beautiful place to live, and the Grampians really attracted us. The sheer beauty, not overly developed. Dunkeld was just such a beautiful little town.
People come to this region for that area to see the wildlife, and everything's just so close up, and to see it just being decimated is horrific.
When you've got a shooter sitting in his vehicle opposite your house with a rifle trained on your front window because there's a kangaroo between him and your front window, should he be allowed to shoot? We didn't think so.
So we've had mothers come in here that have been shot, right? The mother has an injury, shot through the face, can't look after the joey that's in the pouch. The pouch fills up with urine because the mother can't clean it because she's incapacitated. The urine burns the eyes of the joeys. They end up with ulcers on their eyes, you know, and we are supposed to help them recover here. So there are many instances that go on here, horrific, absolutely horrific injuries and circumstances are embedded in this killing industry.
The department gives me my permit to look after wildlife. The department also gave my neighbour a permit to shoot kangaroos. He shot 2 of my kangaroos. He was not a marksman. He shot them in the neck and in the body. One of them died on the way home. When I got to the other one, he had passed away too, but they would have spent days in agony, absolute agony.
If they haven't already gone through enough, how many years of drought have we faced, and then the devastation of the fires that we experienced over the last year, increased in these cull numbers, and creating industries where we're turning our iconic animal into pet food. They've just got everything going against them at the moment, and there's no way that the ecology that dictates their breeding patterns and their population growth can keep up with the exploitation that they're faced with.
And with respect to the slaughter of kangaroos, I think another thing that's often not recognised is what happens to the joeys. I work in Canberra where every year there is an annual slaughter, and I'm always surprised when I'm talking to my patients about it that they don't actually understand what happens to the joeys. And when I tell them, well, they're either bashed or held down and their heads cut off, decapitated, they are absolutely shocked, horrified about this brutality.
You can't sleep at night because you're up all the time, you know. You see the lights flashing through your windows, and it's 5 cars, 4 cars, and it goes for hours on end.
As a yogi, it's just such a violent act, and really to what we do here, I'm just really lost for words that this is acceptable behaviour.
You know, I felt very frightened and very intimidated.
It might stop for 2 or 3 weeks, but then it will go again for another 3 or 4 weeks.
We've discovered that there's no law to stop it, and we have no rights. So there's no right for us to live peacefully, no right for us to run our business without this sort of interruption. The shooters can come in and shoot very close to our property.
I have all the lights going into the house with all the vehicles at night and the gunshots, but also too, on a couple of occasions I have gone out and confronted the gentlemen who were shooting right on my boundary, which isn't a great experience, going out confronting grown men with loaded guns that are very aggressive. Once they kill the mothers, the babies are disorientated, they're jumping into fences, they're losing weight, and then they just waste away and die. It's just heartbreaking.
There appears to be absolutely no reason. You know, they're not damaging the fences, they're not competing with sheep or cattle. They're not even damaging or doing anything to the bush. And they've been killed just for pet food.
And it's left to just a few folk, a few committed people around the country who see these animals as something quite unique and special that really underpin what this country ought to be about in a global sense. When people in other countries think of this country, what do they think about? They think about the wildlife. It's the second most significant tourist attractor in this country, behind the barrier reef. Yet here we are doing our best to destroy it. You know, it beggars belief what goes on in the minds of some of these decision makers.
This industry, or this attitude and this slaughter of kangaroos, it's all under cover of dark, it's well hidden. Even those pictures of the joeys in the death pits with their heads hanging off after they've been decapitated or their throats cut, they were not put in the local paper, on the local news, because people who were trying to get this exposed to the general public so the general public understood what was happening. Both the local newspaper and the local TV station said, oh no, that's too traumatic, that's too horrific to show the general public. And yet this is what's happening. So I think the people are being duped. This is you know, Australia's dirty little secret, really, what happens in this slaughter.
One of the things I'm particularly shocked about is that after the fires, where it's estimated 3 billion Australian native animals died, in Victoria that appears to have made little difference to the rate at which the Victorian government is killing these animals. It's not only kangaroos, it's lots of other species as well. So the devastation that was caused only a year ago seems to have had little impact on the way people are behaving. So that is also going to be very detrimental to populations of wild animals in the state.
In our country, as you know, we have certain stereotypes and myths about kangaroos, which tend to either be sort of, you know, there's some sort of cultural icon that's on the tail of airplanes and glossy brochures, and they're forever sort of hopping through a sunset somewhere. You know, we have this sort of sometimes idealized and sometimes demonized vision of kangaroos, but we don't actually deal with them as a sentient being, as an animal that's really no different than your dog or your horse, the animals that you love. So when you have the opportunity to live with them, as we do in our rural residential sectors, and I think a lot of people do on farms too, to get to know them. Yes, they're lovely animals, and they're gentle. One little family has pretty much decided they're our pets now. And they're around. I recognise them as a family group, you know. So it's really lovely to have the wildlife as your companions and as your pets.
Yeah, I guess because they've introduced a commercial trade, it's sort of contradictory, isn't it, to go rescuing some of those species that are part of a commercial trade, because one of the tricks in actually creating that trade has been to defame these animals through a whole series of marketing campaigns, you know, plagues of kangaroos, overpopulation, kangaroos are dangerous, kangaroos are diseased, kangaroos destroy infrastructure. I mean, there's a whole list of nonsense that has kind of emerged, not only in Victoria, but you get the same stuff in every corner of Australia, and these animals are vanishing incredibly quickly.
The kangaroos didn't out-eat the native grasslands or forests, clearly. White man came and brought with him thistles, plant life that has become just noxious weeds, trees, animals that have just really dislocated the natural environment. Pigs, horses, cattle, sheep, goats, camels, and they've caused immense damage to the grasslands. The kangaroos are soft-footed and they don't harm the plants in the way that the eating patterns of these foreign animals do, or the damage their hooves cause.
One of the things I really love about kangaroos is the relationships in the mob, you know, the beautiful relationship between the young joey and the mother. And joeys stay with their mothers, are milk dependent for what, about 15 months or so?
Joeys live with their mothers for 15 to 18 months, and the time that they're in the pouch, they're touching the whole time. Can there be a more intimate relationship? You know, the mother carries their baby for, you know, in their bodies for, you know, the first 9 months, and then to think that when a female kangaroo is shot, the protocol, the humane way of dealing with these animals is they rip joeys they grab them by the legs, they rip them by their dead mothers, out of their dead mothers' pouches, swing them by the legs, and then smash their heads on something hard. And you know, usually a shooter's tow bar, you know, a tray or a bull bar, and that's humane. It's just savage, and it's so cruel, and it's so wrong, and so brutal.
This killing industry, which is supported by government, not just by the fact that they don't close it down, they actually put money into it. Taxpayers' money go into this industry. And so you end up with, this is the most brutal. This is not like cows and sheep going through the sale yards and ending up in an abattoir in a clinical situation. That's bad enough. This does not happen with this industry. Not happen this way at all. The animals are blinded by spotlight in the middle of the night, shot, generally no clean shot to the head, other kinds of wounds that they have, and then alive, still alive, keep in mind, still alive, have their limbs chopped off and hung up on the back of a ute to be taken to some chiller box somewhere in country somewhere.
Look, we are witnessing the 6th mass extinction event. You know, this is the end game. There is a climate emergency. So you think that the killing would stop, that there'd be no more culling, no more cutting, no more coal. Well, folks, they're increasing. The warning's there. We've seen the signs. You think that the bushfires that took out millions of hectares of our state and killed 3 billion animals. That, you know, the bushfires are the beginning of the end. They're not the, you know, they weren't the end. It wasn't like we got them cleared. This is the beginning of the end. What you're seeing now, it's only just starting. And our governments, you know, our population, animal populations are declining so rapidly, and instead of taking moves to protect our animals, our governments are taking moves to increase the killing, to speed up the carnage. It's just, it defies logic, it defies science, it defies our own survival.
I am very close to despair. I don't think the kangaroos are going to be saved. I think they are going to be extinct, and then there will be national and international outrage, and it will be all too late. I don't have a whole lot of hope for the world itself at this stage. It's what with climate change and everything else. But from my point of view, the one thing that would be worse than failing to achieve anything, to save anything, would be to stop trying.
Exploitation.